I'm Division 10, or Sarah Winters, and I just wanted to thank Neil Gaiman for letting us do this in it's kind of a crazy time. I'm an Aziraphale cosplayer, as you can see, and I wanted to do some readings. I'm also doing readings of Augie and the Green Knight on this channel for kids as Barley from Onward. I've been cosplaying for 20 years, and I love doing charity work, which obviously isn't happening right now with everything that's going on. Going to a kid's hospital or going to a charity event really isn't an option. So I figured, why not read some passages of awesome books and put them up online for people to enjoy while this is happening. So I just want to say thank you to Neil again for letting us do this. And I have one of the parts in Saturday that I have lost my spot for. Give me a moment. Aha. So I'm legally blind, and yes, I'm cheating with something a little bit larger print. I'm not sure if Aziraphale would approve or not. Maybe he just miracle me better glasses. Aziraphale was dithering. He'd been dithering for some 12 hours. His nerves, he would have said, were all over the place. He walked around his shop, picking up bits of paper and dropping them again, fiddling with pens. He ought to tell Crowley. No, he didn't. He wanted to tell Crowley. He ought to tell Heaven. He was an angel, after all. You had to do the right thing. It was built in. You see a while, you thwart. Crowley had put his fingers on it right enough. He ought to have told Heaven right from the start. But he'd known him for thousands of years. They got along. They nearly understood one another. He sometimes suspected that they had far more in common with one another than with their respective supervisors. They both liked the world, for one thing, rather than viewing it simply as the board on which the cosmic game of chess was being played. Well, of course, that was it. That was the answer, staring him in the face. It'd be true to the spirit of his pact with Crowley if he tipped Heaven the wink, and then they could quietly do something about the child. Although nothing too bad, of course, because we were all God's creatures when you got down to it, even people like Crowley and the Antichrist. And the world would be saved, and then there wouldn't have to be all that Armageddon business, which would do nobody any good anyway, because everyone knew Heaven would win in the end, and Crowley would be bound to understand. Yes. And then everything would be all right. There was a knock at the shop door. Despite the closed sign, he ignored it. Getting in touch with Heaven for a two-way communications was far more difficult for Aziraphale than it is for humans, who don't expect an answer, and nearly all cases would be rather surprised to get one. He pushed aside the paper-laden desk and rolled up the threadbare bookshop carpet. There was a small circle chalked on the floorboards underneath, surrounded by suitable passages for the Kabbalah. The angel lit 7 candles, which he placed ritually at certain points around the circle. Then he lit some incense, which was not necessary, but did make the place smell nice. And then he stood in the circle and said the words. Nothing happened. He said the words again. Eventually, a bright blue shaft of light shot down from the ceiling and filled the circle. A well-educated voice said, "Well, it's me, Aziraphale." "We know," said the voice. "I've got great news. I've located the Antichrist. I can give you his address and everything." There was a pause. The blue light flickered. "Well," it said again. "But do you see? You can stop it all happening. I'm in the nick of time. You've only got a few hours. You can stop it all, and there needn't be the war, and everyone will be saved." He beamed madly into the light. "Yes," said the voice. "Yes, he's in a place called Lower Tadfield, and the address—" "Well done," said the voice in flat, dead tones. There doesn't have to be any of that business with 1/3 of the seeds turning to blood or anything, said Aziraphale happily. When it came, the voice sounded slightly annoyed. Why not? It said. Aziraphale felt an icy pit opening under his enthusiasm and tried to pretend it wasn't happening. He plunged on. Well, you can simply make sure that... We will win, Aziraphale. Yes, but... The forces of darkness must be beaten. You seem to be under a misapprehension. The point is not to avoid the war, it is to win it. We have been waiting a long time, Aziraphale. Aziraphale felt the coldness envelop his mind. He opened his mouth to say, do you think perhaps it would be a good idea not to hold the war on Earth? But then changed his mind. I see, he said grimly. There was a scraping near the door, and if Aziraphale had been looking in that direction, he would have seen a battered felt hat trying to peer over the fanlight. That is not to say you have performed well, said the voice. You will receive a commendation. Well done. Thank you, said Aziraphale. The bitterness in his voice would have soured milk. I'd forgotten about ineffability. Obviously. We thought you had. May I ask, said the angel, to whom have I been speaking? The voice said, We are the Metatron. Oh yes, of course. Oh, well, thank you very much, thank you. Behind him, the letterbox tilted open, revealing a pair of eyes. One other thing, said the voice. You will of course be joining us, won't you? Well, yes, of course. It has simply been ages since I've held a flaming sword and... Aziraphale began. Yes, we recall, said the voice. You will have a lot of opportunity to relearn. What sort of initiating event will precipitate the war? Said Aziraphale. We thought a multi-nation nuclear exchange would be a nice start. Yes, very, very imaginative. Aziraphale's voice was flat and hopeless. Good. We will expect you directly then, said the voice. I'll just clear up a few business matters, shall I? Said Aziraphale desperately. There hardly seems to be any necessity, said the Metatron. Aziraphale drew himself up. I really feel that probity, not to say morality, demands that as a reputable businessman I should... Yes, said the Metatron, a shade testily. Point taken, we shall await you then. The light faded, but did not quite vanish. They're leaving the line open, Aziraphale thought. I'm not getting out of this one. Hello, he said softly. Anyone still there? There was silence. Very carefully, he stepped over to the circle and crept to the telephone. He opened his notebook and dialed another number. After 4 rings, it gave a little cough, followed by a pause, and then a voice which sounded so laid back you could put a carpet on it. It said, Hi, this is Anthony Crowley. Crowley! Aziraphale tried to hiss and shout at the same time. Listen, I haven't got much time. Probably not in right now, or asleep, and busy or something, but... Shut up! Listen! It was in Tadfield. It's all in that book. You've got to stop after the tone, and I'll get right back to you. Ciao. I want to talk to you now. Stop making noises. It's in Tadfield. That was what I was sensing. You must go there. He took his phone away from his mouth. Bugger, he said. It was the first time he'd sworn in more than 6,000 years. Hold on. The demon had another line, didn't he? He was that kind of person. Aziraphale fumbled in the book, nearly dropping it on the floor. They would be getting impatient soon. He found the other number. He dialed it. It was answered almost immediately. At the same time, the shop's bell tingled gently. Crowley's voice, getting louder as it neared the mouthpiece, said, Really mean it? Hello? Crowley, it's me! Ugh. The voice was horribly noncommittal. Even in his present state, Aziraphale sensed trouble. Are you alone? He said cautiously. Nah, got an old friend here. Listen! Away with ye, spawn of hell! Very slowly, Aziraphale turned around. Shadwell was trembling with excitement. He'd seen it all. He'd heard it all. He hadn't understood any of it, but he knew what people did with circles and candlesticks and incense. He knew that all right. He'd seen the devil rides out 15 times, 16 times if you included the time he'd been thrown out of the cinema for shouting his unflattering opinions of amateur witchfinder Christopher Lee. The buggers were using him. They'd been making fools out of the glorious traditions of the army. I'll have ye, ye evil bastard! He shouted, advancing like a moth-eating avenging angel. I ken what ye be about, coming up here and seducing women to do your evil will. I think perhaps you've got the wrong shop, said Aziraphale. I'll call back later. He told the receiver and hung up. I could see what you were about, snarled Shadwell. There were flecks of foam around his mouth. He was more angry than he could ever remember. Things are not what they seem, Aziraphale began, aware even as he said it that conventional gambits went, it lacked a certain polish. I bet they ain't, said Shadwell triumphantly. No, I mean, without taking his eyes off the angel. Shadwell shuffled backwards and grabbed the shop door, slamming it hard so the bell jingled. Bell, he said. He grabbed the nice and accurate prophecies and thumped it heavily on the table. Book, he snarled. He fumbled in his pocket and produced it his trusty Ronson. Practically candle, he shouted and began to advance. In his path, the circle glowed with a faint blue light. Said Aziraphale, I think it might not be a very good idea to... Shadwell wasn't listening. By the powers invested in me by virtue of my office of Witfinder, he intoned, I charge ye to quit from this place. You see the circle, and return henceforth to the place which you come, pausing not to. It would really be unwise for a human to set foot in without, and deliver us from evil. Keep out of the circle, you stupid man! Never to come again to fetch. Yes, but please keep out of... Aziraphale ran toward Shadwell, waving his hands ungently. Returning nay more, Shadwell finished. He pointed a vengeful, black-nailed finger. Aziraphale looked down at his feet and swore for the second time in 5 minutes. He'd stepped into the circle. Oh, fuck, he said. There was a melodious twang, and the blue glow vanished. So did Aziraphale. 30 seconds went by. Shadwell didn't move. Then, with a trembling left hand, he reached up and carefully lowered his right hand. Hello, he said. Hello? No one answered. Shadwell shivered. Then, with his hand held out in front of him like a gun that he didn't dare fire and didn't know how to unload, he stepped out into the street, letting the door slam behind him. It shook to the floor. One of Aziraphale's candles fell over, spilling burning wax across the old, dry wood. All right. Thank you for listening to our section. If you want to move on to the next section of the book, just click the tabs. If you found it directly through Twitter, there should be a link to the listing of the book as a whole in a playlist in the description of this video. If you came here through the playlist, you can click ahead. But I figured I'd take a couple of minutes to teach you guys how to make challah, which is a little ironic considering that Passover is this week. Now, Passover is the one time of year in Jewish celebrations that we don't eat challah. We eat matzah instead. But matzah must be made in under 18 minutes for it to be considered kosher for Passover. And unfortunately, with what's going on right now, I don't have access to matzah. I can't get it online or through grocery delivery. I'm blind, so I can't drive to a grocery store that has it. And it must be made at home in under 18 minutes for it to be considered kosher for Passover, as I said. But Judaism is interesting in that in cases of emergency or health, you're supposed to ignore Jewish law. You're not supposed to eat kosher if it impacts your ability to, eat. I figured if I'm gonna have a Passover Seder and I'm able to get everything else I need, and I can't get or make challah that isn't chametz, I might as well make, matzah that isn't chametz, I might as well just make challah. It's very easy to make. It doesn't take a lot of time to make as far as like time that you spend making the challah, but it takes quite a bit of time for it to rise between steps. So you're gonna need to block out about 5 hours, of which you're only gonna be spending about 30 minutes max actually doing anything. So let's start. I'm gonna put the recipe in the description as well. It's called Challah 1. It's from All Recipes. I've been using this one for as long as I can remember since I moved out of my parents' house. And we're gonna start with 2.5 cups of warm water. So I'm gonna go grab a measure. And to that is a packet dry yeast. If you're doing your own sourdough starter, there's a pretty decent way to convert. We basically need about a tablespoon of yeast here. We're gonna add in a 1/2 cup of honey. Now, challah is often determined by the quality of your honey, so if you're able to get local, absolutely do so. All right, 4 tablespoons of veggie oil. 2 eggs. I know the recipe says 3 eggs, but if you actually read through it, that 3rd egg is being used as an egg wash later. It's not part of the actual dough. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Let's whisk all that up. Now that that's done and dusted, it's 8 cups of flour. Adding in one at a time, and slowly turning this from liquid into actual dough. I don't sift. Challah for me is just kind of like rustic bread. And at this point, it's starting to actually look something like a dough. Yeah, it's still just a little bit too gummy. I'm gonna do like a 1/2 cup here for my 8. All right, I think that's just about as much as this dough is willing to take. So I'm gonna show you what my finished piece looks like. And we're gonna leave it for, yes, 90 whole minutes. Come back to this later. So here we go. Roughly like this. Get it into a rough ball shape. All right, see you in 90 minutes. It's been 90 minutes. I don't have a demon that controls time, so I had to wait like a normal person. The dough should be about doubled in size. I hope you washed your hands. I just did. When you're kneading for challah and for most breads, not all, I don't think quick breads need this. What you're looking for is what's called a window pane consistency. So a window pane is if you take a piece of your dough and you stretch it out and you can pull it out thin enough that you can see light through it. As you saw, it just broke apart in my hands, so we need to build up that gluten to make that window pane. Cool, so this one's done. All right, through the magic of television, I have now completely kneaded both of these and no longer need an arm workout for the next infinity number of days. So each of these is gonna get split into 3, and then we're gonna braid it. start stretching it out. Making it longer and thinner. No rolling pin, just my hands. Again, Challah's thousands of years old. So now I've got 3 lengths because Challah is braided. I'm gonna put it down on the sheet. And I've pinched the edges and I'm gonna start the braid. Stretching the dough out as I go on any sections that are a little bit short. Again, I'm going for rustic. The only person right now who's going to see this is me and, well, my roommate. And I've just made a little hollow. I'll do the same with the other one. It may separate as it proofs the second time. At that point, I'll just pinch it again. I also like to put them on the trays when they're smaller trays diagonally, just so that they get a little bit more room. So that's that. These need to proof for about another hour. So again, wet paper towel, stick these on top of the stove. So there's one thing left to do. Challahs look gorgeous. I took off their wrappers. They've risen nicely. They haven't unbound themselves. And in fact, they've risen into each other. So the braid looks like it'll hold. Yes, I washed my hands again. I've also set my oven to 375 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm not sure what that is in Celsius. I've got that 3rd egg here that the recipe calls for. We're gonna crack that open. I'm gonna whisk it, add a little bit of water, not much. And this will be the egg wash on top of the challah. So. And as soon as my oven's heated up, this is just gonna go in the oven for about 40 minutes. At that mark, check it, and I'll show you the test to check to see if it's done when it's ready to go. So we'll be back in about 40 or 50 minutes. So challah have been in the oven for about 45 minutes. They're done. You can tell because they've got that nice golden brown doneness to them, but the way, again, wash your hands, you can tell if challah are finished. Give them a thump on the underside once they've cooled a little bit. If you hear like a hollow sound, that means that your challah is done. So thank you again for watching this. Hope you enjoy the rest of the Good Omens reads. And whatever you celebrate, I know there's a lot of spring celebrations going on right now. Be safe and enjoy because, well, these celebrations are here for a reason. They're a little bit of a light in the darkness. So, on we go.